What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And it was an inevitability that I would be returning to talk about Christopher Nolan's newest film, The Odyssey, because as you most likely know by this point, Christopher Nolan is probably my favorite filmmaker ever. For years, he has been consistently producing high-quality films, some of which are my absolute favorites of all time. So I was anxiously anticipating his interpretation of possibly the foundational story of Western culture. And does it live up to my expectations? Hell yeah, man. There was never a shadow of a doubt in my mind that Nolan would deliver with this film. However, I will say it's nowhere near my favorite Nolan film. After seeing the film, a friend of mine who'd also seen it asked me what my thoughts were, and my instant response was medium tier Nolan, which is still a 9 out of 10 near perfect film, but we're talking about a guy who has made some of the greatest of all time. And funnily enough, this seems to be one of Nolan's most divisive films, at least in recent memory. Now, I think most of that divisiveness comes from people being uninformed, prejudiced idiots who need to spend less time on the internet and who should touch some grass, but we'll get back to that later. For now, let's talk about what I thought of The Odyssey. Now, as with Dunkirk, Tenet, and Oppenheimer before it, The Odyssey's cinematography by Hoyt van Hoytema does an incredible job of grounding these larger-than-life visuals that Christopher Nolan is renowned for at this point. He really does manage to present these fantastical, mythological characters and ideas in a way which is palatable for the most general audience possible, and I think that's a very commendable feat. In that sense, this film feels simultaneously familiar and somewhat alien for Nolan. On one hand, we do have his trademark non-linearity, which some of us all know and love. However, I was surprised by some of the directions that this film took. As I'm sure you've heard by this point, the Cyclops scene feels horror-inspired, from the way it's shot and framed, with the constant building suspense, even down to the design of the creature itself. It was quite unsettling in a way that I'm not used to seeing from Nolan. Similarly, the Circe scene, where she turns all of Odysseus's men into pigs, was actually kind of horrifying to watch, to the extent that I almost couldn't look at the screen. I've never felt that way watching any of his films, and that's not to say that Nolan's films have ever been fun in a traditional sense, but this felt like him stepping outside of his comfort zone, not pulling from his usual bag of tricks, if you know what I mean. I've said this about Christopher Nolan countless times, and I'll say it again. He knows how to end a movie, to leave the audience on an image that is striking and thought-provoking, which will remain in your mind for days, weeks, months, even years to come. I felt that way about Dunkirk, The Prestige, Oppenheimer, and this film follows suit. The final line from Odysseus brings everything full circle and contextualizes this story in a very broad sense, which leaves all of us questioning who we are. The film is a very complicated reflection on the human condition and our capacity to betray our own principles to accomplish more lofty goals, but will we be remembered for the terrible things we might do along the way that we come to regret, which we can never fully forget ourselves? There's so much to that, and how this film leaves off. I don't think that I'll be forgetting it anytime soon. And this complex, reflective journey is masterfully carried by Matt Damon in the role of Odysseus, who, holy shit, blew me away, man. Like, I knew he was a fantastic actor and leading man, but what shocked me most about him in this film is how he played against type. He wasn't just being Matt Damon. He brought layer upon layer of nuanced pathos to this character and his arc over the course of the 3 hours that comprise this film. I think that a Best Leading Actor nomination at the Oscars next year is more than deserved in this case. But it wasn't only him who surprised me. Tom Holland was really good here. Now, he didn't blow me away to the same extent that Damon did, but he did prove to me that he can act outside of being Spider-Man for the 20th time. Robert Pattinson also works really well as a complete sleazeball antagonist. Everyone is in this movie. Robert Pattinson's little evil underling character looked incredibly familiar to me. I was like, who the hell is this guy? Only to find out that it's...
Tell that to Kanja Club.
From The Force Awakens. I feel like I'm just going down a list of things that are blatantly obvious to everyone by now, but I simply have to talk about Ludwig Göransson's score for this film. I listened to the entire thing at work the day prior to seeing the film, and after hearing it in the context of this movie, I am once again awestruck by his ability to immerse me in various different types of stories. In this case, his cacophony of ancient sounds, instruments, and vocals just brought this story down to earth in a way that I wasn't expecting. Now, the only question is, what'll he be winning the Best Original Score Oscar for next year? Is it gonna be this, or his score for The Mandalorian and Grogu 2 months ago, which was probably the only exceptional thing about that movie? On the topic of that aforementioned nearly 3-hour runtime, I didn't feel a second of it. Granted, I am the guy who religiously rewatches The Lord of the Rings and Hobbit extended editions, plus several of Nolan's 2.5-hour plus movies, so I'm not the kind of guy to talk to if you've got a problem with long movies, because I don't. With that said, I still think it's kind of astounding how well Nolan is able to justify that beefy runtime in this case, because I think it's exactly the length it needed to be. If anything, I wish I could have spent more time in this world with this cast of characters, and when that's the reaction you're getting out of me, I think you achieved what you set out to do. Now, when it comes to the controversy surrounding this film, or the division amongst the audience, I know a lot of people have issues with the casting choices, or the historical inaccuracy of some of the costume designs. I just don't really care that much. If your issue is that some of the actors are black, or there's a trans person in the movie, then just fuck off. I don't want to listen to you. If you have issues with some of the presentation and production design in the film, then that's more than fair. However, I just chalk that up to being a creative liberty taken with the source material. I went into this expecting Nolan's vision of The Odyssey. And that's what I got. So I wasn't bothered by everything not being completely period accurate, because at the end of the day, it is the fantasy story of all fantasy stories. So I'm more than willing to suspend my disbelief. If anything, I found the slightly bigger issue to be the amount of modern colloquialisms used by the characters. Now, this wasn't nearly as intrusive as I expected it to be, but when I heard characters saying, "fuck you," or Tom Holland shouting "dad" to Matt Damon, I raised my eyebrows ever so slightly. As I said, it wasn't a complete game breaker for me, as it has been for many people. But I figured it was worth mentioning because it stood out to me just a little bit. I will also say this about the film and Nolan's approach to storytelling. I found The Odyssey to be a slightly more disjointed experience than something like an Oppenheimer or Dunkirk. The main events we follow on Odysseus's journey over the course of the film felt more like mini vignettes strung together rather than a consistently smooth, flowing narrative, which was quite possibly the intention via telling this story through the eyes of Odysseus, who is experiencing all of it firsthand. You could chalk it up to Nolan's editing or the way the story has been structured. If anything, it's probably just the episodic nature of the story of the Odyssey. And hell, it might just click for me on second viewing in a way that it didn't this time around, just like it did with Oppenheimer 3 years ago. At the end of the day, regardless of the minor gripes or nitpicks I may have with it, The Odyssey is just an epic journey, and it's in its own league entirely when it comes to modern filmmaking. This is absolutely one of the best films of the year, and that's saying a lot considering that 2026 is the year that we've gotten the best Pixar film since 2022 and Project Hail Frickin' Mary, but it's definitely going down as a modern classic, and a reaffirmation that Nolan still got it as a director. He's still innovating this late in his career, and above all else, he is an artist. Perhaps one of the few true artists still left in Hollywood who understands what the medium of film is capable of beyond explosions and making money. But you guys let me know. What are your thoughts on The Odyssey? Do you agree with me that it is yet another cinematic triumph from the man himself? Or do you disagree with me and think that it's on the lower end of his filmography? Just whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.